Have you ever given everything you had to your family, money, time, your future, only to find out that everything you did was built on a lie? My name is Elena Navarro. I'm 34 years old and live in Oslo, now thousands of miles away from where I was born. Not just geographically, but emotionally too. I used to believe I was the lucky one. My family wasn't wealthy, but I thought they loved me. I earned a full scholarship abroad, got a great job in AI, and every month I sent money home to help with the house bills, my little brother's dreams. Nothing extravagant. Just enough to keep things stable. At least, that's what I thought. But this story isn't really about money. It's about manipulation, betrayal, and the moment I realized I was nothing more than a walking safety net, someone they counted on only when it was convenient. This isn't a tale of revenge in the explosive sense. No screaming, no lawsuits, just silence, the kind that cuts deeper than words. The kind that makes people finally feel what it's like when the one person they leaned on steps away. I'm not telling this to be praised. I'm telling it to ask you, if you were me, would you have done the same thing? I grew up in a place where time didn't move, it rusted. The village I was raised in sits curled between two faded mountain ranges in northern Spain, where fog clings to the rooftops like a second skin, and the only sounds are the creaking of wooden carts, stray dogs barking in the distance, and church bells that rang more out of habit than faith. We lived in a stone house built by someone else's grandfather, with cracked walls and a wood stove that groaned every winter. Our water came from a pump in the yard, and I can still feel the sting of cold metal on my fingers every morning before school, scraping ice off the spout just to rinse my face. Inside, the house was dim. Noisy tiles, warped window frames, a kitchen that smelled like burned garlic and kerosene. The kind of place where laughter felt out of place, like it didn't belong. My parents had come from South America before I was born, immigrants with calloused hands and permanent frowns. They didn't believe in praise. They believed in debt. And to them, I was a daughter, which meant I was born already owing. Girls are temporary guests, my father once told me. You feed them, clothe them, then one day they leave, not worth putting too much into. He wasn't angry when he said it. He was calm, like someone reciting the weather. My mother didn't argue, she just handed me a mop and told me to scrub the soot off the fireplace. I was 11. From that age on, my worth was measured in utility. Not love, not presence, usefulness. Carlos, my younger brother, was different. Not better, just male. Which, in our house, was enough. He could spill juice on the couch and be met with a gentle laugh. I could miss one speck of dirt behind the stove and get a full lecture on laziness. I remember once, I was 13, came home with a certificate for academic excellence, top of my class. I placed it on the table, proud but nervous. My father didn't even glance at it. "Is the floor done?" he asked, wiping his shoes at the door. Carlos was on the porch that day, drawing on the walls with permanent marker. He got a hug. I got a rag. By 15, I started working. Not because I had to, but because I understood something no one had to say out loud. If I wanted out, I'd have to buy my own freedom. Every morning before school, I swept floors at the town's only cafe. I'd mop between tables while the owner's dog napped near the oven. I still remember how the sunrise looked through that greasy window, golden, gentle, like a life I wasn't allowed to reach for. After school, I tutored younger kids in math. On weekends, I helped old neighbors clean out their dusty attics, crawling through cobwebs and sneezing through mold. I never kept a cent. Every euro went straight into my mother's ceramic bowl above the fridge. She said it was for the house. But the house never changed. The roof still leaked when it rained. The windows still rattled like bones in the wind. The electricity still cut out if we used the oven and the washing machine at the same time. And still, my mother would tell me to be thankful, at least you're not on the street. And I was thankful, at least I told myself to be. Gratitude was the only way to survive in that house without becoming bitter. But the truth, every thank you I whispered felt like sandpaper on my tongue. By 17, I had 2 jobs and a scholarship application in process. I filled it out in secret, during late nights with a blanket over my head and a flashlight in my teeth. I wrote my essay on the back of scrap paper I took from school. My laptop was so old it wheezed when I opened more than one tab. When I got the full scholarship to study computer science in Oslo, I cried not because I was happy, but because I didn't know how to tell my family. When I finally did, my mother frowned. So far away. People will think something's wrong with you. My father didn't even look up. He simply asked, "Will you send money back?" That was the day the illusion cracked. The day I realized my escape was not their celebration, it was their concern. They weren't proud, they were calculating. To them, I was not a daughter. I was a future wire transfer, a walking investment, a silent ATM, and you know what? I still went. Because if I stayed, I would have become someone I'd grow to despise. The version of myself who kept scrubbing floors in the dark, praying for a thank you that would never come. I left the village with one suitcase, no promises, and a heart that had already learned how to beat quietly, without taking up too much space. And yet, even miles away, their hands would still find ways to reach back into my pockets. But that part comes later. I wish I could say Carlos changed as he got older, that time humbled him, or life knocked some perspective into him. But the truth is, when the world keeps cushioning your every fall, you start to believe you can't break. Carlos coasted through high school on charm and excuses. When he graduated, my parents threw him a party they never gave me. I watched from a distance, holding a paper plate of food I'd helped pay for, listening to my father tell neighbors. My son's going to be an entrepreneur, big things ahead. The only thing bigger than Carlos's ambition was his lack of follow-through. He started university, business, naturally, but dropped out after barely a year. Too academic, he said. Not hands-on enough. Real money is in crypto now, not textbooks. And just like that, he declared himself a self-taught blockchain investor. Bought a ring light, set up a laptop on the kitchen table, and started calling himself founder of a digital startup that didn't even have a website. For months, he walked around with headphones on, shouting into Discord servers and talking about staking and pump-and-dump strategies like he was building the future of finance. Every family dinner became a pitch meeting. Elena, you're in tech, you get it. AI, crypto, it's the same wave. This is the new frontier. I wanted to believe him, I really did. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had found something he was finally willing to commit to. But deep down, I saw it for what it was. Another attempt to be handed success without building the staircase. The money he used to invest, it wasn't his. It came from a loan he took out in my mother's name with her signature, of course. She said, "It's just temporary, he's trying, he's different from you." Different indeed. When the market crashed, and it always crashes for people like Carlos, the debt didn't disappear. It grew teeth. Late fees, interest, phone calls, stress. I was living in Oslo by then, waking up at 5 a.m. to code and sleeping next to books about machine learning. Meanwhile, my brother was back on the couch, watching YouTube videos about rebuilding after setbacks, videos made by the same people who tricked him in the first place. Guess who they turned to when the bank sent final notices? Yeah, me. Carlos just needs a little help, my mother whispered over the phone. It's not his fault, the economy is unstable. Can you just cover this for now? We'll figure it out later. Later never came. I sent the money, of course. 1,000 here, 2,000 there. I told myself I was doing it to protect them, but in truth, I was doing it because I still hadn't fully unlearned the guilt they'd programmed into me. Carlos never said thank you, not once. But he did buy himself a new pair of noise-canceling headphones. He called it an investment in focus. I called it what it was, insulation from consequences. That's when I realized Carlos wasn't failing. He was floating. And the reason he could float was because I was the one drowning in his place. I moved to Oslo with 2 suitcases, a used winter coat, and a heart still learning how to beat without guilt. The scholarship had been a miracle, or so I was told. You're lucky, my mother said. Not smart, not capable, just lucky. as if opportunity had tripped and landed in my lap. Like all those sleepless nights working shifts and studying with a flashlight were some kind of cosmic accident. Oslo was gray, efficient, cold, and exactly what I needed. It was the first place in my life where silence felt peaceful instead of oppressive, where no one expected me to cook dinner after work, where I could breathe and not owe anyone for the air. I worked hard. I always did. My first job was as a junior engineer for a machine learning startup. Within 2 years, I was leading a small team. My name was on patents. I was speaking at conferences. To most people, that would be something to celebrate. To my family, it was a savings account they didn't have to open themselves. At first, it was small things, a medical bill for my father's back, repairs for the roof after a storm, new shoes for Carlos. Reasonable requests, at least in theory, but there was no end. No matter how much I sent, there was always something else, always just this once. Always will pay you back. They never did. When I told them I was finally saving for a place of my own, a little apartment outside the city, nothing fancy, my mother didn't congratulate me. She just asked, "Will there still be enough for the house?" I paused. What house? That's when they told me about the ancestral home. A small stone house on the edge of our old village, passed down, allegedly, through generations. But it needed repairs. The title wasn't fully in their name yet. They were making payments, and they were close, but if they missed any more months, they might lose it. "It's our legacy," my father said, like he was quoting a movie. "We want to keep it in the family." Something inside me stirred, not guilt. Not love, just weariness. But I said yes, because I still wasn't ready to be the villain in their story. Every month, I sent what they needed, €950, sometimes more. I put off my house deposit. I lived in a rental that smelled like old paint and moldy pipes. I stopped going out, canceled 2 vacations. And still, they asked for more. When I hesitated, they reminded me of how lucky I was. You live alone in a nice city. You have a career, you don't have children to feed. Helping your family should come first. I wanted to scream, not because they were wrong about my situation, but because they had no idea what it cost me to get here. To them, my success wasn't effort, it was access. To them, I wasn't Elena the engineer, I was Elena the wallet. And yet, I kept wiring money. Not because I believed them, but because part of me still wanted to believe I mattered in that house. That maybe, one day, they'd see me as more than just the safety net beneath their bad decisions. But I should have known better. Because the truth was, that ancestral home, the one I was helping them save, it was never mine to enter. Not even in their eyes. It started with a promise. "Just 3 years," my mother said over the phone. "If we can hold out until then, the house will be fully paid off. We just need consistency. Stability." Stability. That word echoed in my head for hours after that call, not because it comforted me, but because it felt like a leash disguised as logic. They told me the numbers, €950 a month. Maybe some months less, but always close. Taxes, insurance, interest, back payments. It was all part of this so-called ancestral handover, as if they were preserving history instead of clinging to a fantasy they couldn't afford. And I believed them, or more honestly, I believed I didn't have a choice, so I adjusted. I scaled back my spending. I stopped contributing to my retirement fund. I ate lentils 3 nights a week. Every time I clicked transfer on my banking app, it felt like another piece of me slipped into that crumbling house I hadn't seen in over a decade. I kept track, not because I expected repayment, but because I wanted to remember the cost of being quiet. By the end of those 3 years, I had sent a little over $30,000. $30, $1,000, enough to buy a small cabin, enough to cover a master's degree, enough to start a business. But in my family's eyes, it was simply what you do when you love people. That was the part that stung the most. Because with every transaction, the gratitude didn't increase, it evaporated. At first, they thanked me, brief messages. "You're saving us, we're so lucky." But by year 2, those messages turned into expectations. Can you send it earlier this month? We had a surprise plumbing issue. Add 200 euros. Carlos might move back home for a bit. Is that okay? They never asked if I was okay. Never wondered how I felt paying for a house I'd never been invited to step foot in. Never asked how it felt to finance comfort for people who never saved an inch of it for me. And when I tried to bring it up, just once, my father interrupted me mid-sentence. Elena, this isn't a sacrifice. It's family duty. Family duty, that phrase should be warm. It should sound like love wrapped in tradition. But from his mouth, it sounded like a sentence, a life term, and I realized something cold and ugly. The only reason they kept calling it our family home was because I was paying for it. If I stopped, it would no longer be mine, not even in name, not even in memory. So I said nothing, because that's what I was trained to do. By the third year, the money transfers stopped feeling like help and started feeling like dues. There were no more thank yous, no updates, no photos of renovations or progress. Just short, clinical texts that read like billing notices. Mortgage due. Same amount as last time. Add extra this month, Carlos is short again. It was never a question, never a conversation, just expectation. Like I was some silent benefactor funding a family project I wasn't even allowed to see. At work, I was managing a team of engineers, building real things, making decisions that mattered. But at home, or whatever they called home, I had no voice, no presence, only a bank account they pretended was endless. One day, after months of burnout and rising anxiety, I finally allowed myself to say it, I need a break. I emailed my manager, asked about a 1-year sabbatical. Not to travel or study, just to rest, to breathe, and I thought maybe I could spend a year back in Spain, reconnect, recharge, live in the very house I'd helped secure. It wasn't even a big ask. I didn't want to own it. I just wanted a room, a bed, a place to call mine. So I called my mother, nervous but hopeful. I hadn't asked for anything in years. This, I thought, was reasonable. She paused. Then said, almost too quickly, "Now, it's not a good time." I blinked. Why? Well, your father's back pain is worse. He's using the downstairs room. And Carlos moved back in after the layoffs. You know how small this place is. I waited for her to offer something, anything. A timeline, a compromise, but there was nothing. Just silence on the line, like the call had ended emotionally, even if technically we were still connected. That night, I lay in bed in my Oslo apartment, 600 square feet, barely enough for my life. And I stared at the ceiling, numb with one thought echoing louder than anything she said. I've paid for half a house, and I don't even have a couch to sleep on. I didn't call back the next day, or the day after that. I still sent the money, but something had shifted. They may not have kicked me out, but they made it very clear, I didn't belong there. I was good enough to pay for the roof, just not to stand under it. And I started to wonder, quietly and bitterly. If I stopped paying, would they even notice I was gone, or just notice the money missing? I don't know what pushed me to do it. Maybe it was restlessness. Maybe I just wanted proof that everything I gave had meant something. It had been nearly 6 years since I'd last stepped foot in my hometown. One day, without warning, without telling anyone, I booked a flight to Spain and showed up unannounced. I wanted to see the house. The ancestral home. The place I'd invested $30,000 into, brick by brick, month after month. What I found instead was a rented lie. The house was there, gray stone, ivy crawling up the sides, just like I remembered from the photos. But something felt off. The front gate had a realtor's name on it, not for sale, for lease. I walked up anyway, my heart already starting to pound. I knocked. No one answered. I waited, then walked around the side. That's when I saw him, Carlos, on the patio in sweatpants, drinking from a beer can like it was morning coffee. He looked up stunned, not happy, not welcoming, just caught. "Elena, you didn't say you were coming." I didn't smile. Didn't think I needed permission. He shifted in his seat, muttered something about Mom not being home. I didn't wait. I walked inside, and there it was, the living room I'd helped save. The kitchen I'd repaired. The roof I'd rebuilt. But it wasn't ours, and it never had been. Later that day, I went to the municipal office just to be sure. One request, one printed page, and everything unraveled. The house was not owned by my family. It was a long-term rental. Had been for over 10 years. Still listed under the name of a retired couple who lived 2 towns over. The mortgage I'd been paying, there was no mortgage. I stood there at the counter, frozen. The paper in my hand felt heavier than any check I'd ever written. All those years, all those transfers, all those emergencies. It hadn't gone toward a family legacy. It had gone to cover Carlos's crypto debts. And not just that, shady loans from high-interest lenders, gambling losses, failed ventures with friends from Telegram. I felt my legs move, but I wasn't walking. I was floating like I'd just watched my entire childhood get rewritten in red ink. When I got back to the house, my mother was already home. She looked surprised, flustered, but not guilty. No one looked guilty. I asked her directly. Quietly, why did you lie to me about the house? She didn't blink. Carlos needed a fresh start. I stared at her, trying to make sense of that answer. She said it like it explained everything, like it excused everything. You always land on your feet, Elena, she added. He's not like you, you're strong, you always manage. And in that moment, something inside me stopped. Not broke, stopped. Because now I saw the truth not just in their actions, but in their beliefs. They didn't just use me. They expected me to carry everyone else because I had proven I could. And Carlos, he didn't need to stand. Because I'd always been the ground beneath his feet. After I found out the house wasn't ours, I couldn't sleep. I stayed 2 nights in a cheap hostel outside the village, not because I didn't have family to stay with, but because I no longer considered them my family. Not in any way that mattered. I kept thinking, what else have they lied about? On the 3rd day, I went back to the municipal office. This time, I wasn't looking for property records. I was looking for something deeper, something colder. I asked for access to historical residency and guardianship documents. Just out of curiosity, I told myself. What I found was something I wasn't prepared for, and yet, something that made perfect, devastating sense. My father, the man who'd raised me, disciplined me, claimed authority over me for most of my life, had legally relinquished his guardianship over me when I was 17. 17, right around the time I'd gotten that scholarship. Right after I'd told them I was leaving Spain. Right after I'd become, in their eyes, self-sufficient. He had signed the form in a clean, slanted signature. Filed through the court, no dispute, no objections. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. I sat there staring at the document, my name next to a line that read, "No longer under legal responsibility of parent." It was dated 6 months before I boarded my flight to Oslo. He hadn't done it to punish me. He'd done it to avoid taxes. One of the office staff explained it casually, how some parents filed early relinquishments to bypass obligations tied to government financial disclosures for scholarships or benefits. It's not that uncommon, she said, sipping her coffee, especially when a child is going abroad and no longer seen as financially dependent. But I was dependent. I had been sending money to them. They'd let me believe I was part of the family, while on paper I was already written out of it. And the irony was brutal. They cut ties with me to protect their own pockets, then came back for mine. I walked out of that building into the thin, dry afternoon air. The mountains in the distance looked as hollow as I felt. And for the first time in my life, I stopped feeling hurt and started feeling finished. You weren't their daughter, something inside me whispered. You were their investment, and they cashed out early. It took me a while to process what I was looking at. A government form, a checkbox, a signature. That's all it took for my father to legally remove himself from me. No conversation, no warning, no hesitation. He didn't do it because of a fight or because I disappointed him. He did it, I would later confirm, to avoid reporting me as a dependent for tax purposes once I won the scholarship. He would have owed more if he kept me on record. So he chose to let the state know. She's not my responsibility anymore. I sat alone on a park bench just outside the office, holding the printout like it might vanish if I stared hard enough. The wind was sharp that day. A crisp mountain breeze that cut straight through my coat and into my chest. I had already accepted that they used me for money. I had accepted that the house was a lie. I had even accepted that Carlos would always come first. But this wasn't just betrayal. This was deletion. He hadn't just lied to me. He had cut me out of the family on paper and never told me, while I was still sending money, still calling home, still saying I miss you. And suddenly, everything felt false. The phone calls, the we're proud of you, the we couldn't do this without you. It wasn't love, it was leverage. I remember saying it out loud, quietly, like a confession to no one. I wasn't just tricked out of money, I was erased. And that thought hit harder than anything else in the entire story. They didn't just take from me. They made me disappear, then came back when they needed more. I didn't cry. Tears require a kind of shock. I was past that. What I felt was something colder, heavier, not anger, not grief, clarity. It was the clearest I had ever felt in my life, like waking up after years of wandering through a fog and realizing you've been walking in circles. They had drawn the line first. I was just finally ready to step over it and never look back. I didn't scream. I didn't write a furious email or show up at their doorstep demanding apologies. That's not how this ends, not for people like me. When your pain was built over years of silence, your revenge doesn't come in the form of noise. It comes in the form of absence. I went back to Oslo and started unraveling everything. Quietly, methodically, like cleaning up someone else's mess for the last time. First, I logged into every bank account that had been linked to theirs, joint transfers, standing orders, scheduled payments. Cancelled, all of them. I deleted the autopay for what I now knew was a non-existent mortgage. I closed the backup emergency account I had opened for Carlos when he'd temporarily needed help during his startup crash. I called my lawyer and filed a notice formally ending any informal financial guardianship. It wasn't legally binding, not anymore, but it was symbolic. I wanted it in writing. Then came the final step. I drafted an email. No emotion, no drama, just facts. Subject line, termination of financial support. Effective immediately. I will no longer provide financial assistance or serve as a guarantor for any personal or household-related expenses. All accounts have been delinked and closed. Future requests for money will not be acknowledged or responded to. I do not require reimbursement for past transfers. Consider them paid in full, not as debt, but as closure. Elena's. No goodbyes, no guilt, no room left for interpretation. I didn't send it to just one person. I sent it to all of them, my mother, my father, Carlos, same message, same tone, same clarity. Then I blocked their numbers. Every single one. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it for peace. Because for once in my life, I needed to protect myself like no one else ever had. And when it was done, when everything was finally, truly severed, I sat on the floor of my tiny Oslo apartment, staring at the quiet glow of my laptop screen. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. A few days passed after I cut all the payments. I thought that would be it. But then came the messages. Not calls, just texts and emails from unknown numbers and burner accounts. The same cycle, we're confused. This feels unfair. You're being dramatic. You owe us a conversation. I didn't owe them a thing, but I still had one final thing to send. This time, it wasn't just a goodbye, it was documentation. I opened my laptop and drafted one last email. Short, calm, unshakable. Subject, final clarification. I'm aware there may still be misunderstandings about what I've done or why, so let me clear the air once and for all. Here are 2 documents. Link bank statement, full transfer record. This confirms I was the sole financial contributor toward what was claimed to be a mortgage. Link property registry, legal ownership confirmation. This confirms the house you described as ours is not, and never was, in your name. I won't argue about intentions, the facts speak loud enough. From this point forward, I will not engage further. My family from now on is truth, not blood. Elena. I hit send, not with anger, not with shaking hands. Just a steady breath, the kind you take after surfacing from deep water. I stared at the screen for a moment longer, then closed my laptop. No more proof. No more justification. No more being the daughter they only remembered when something broke. After the final email, I didn't look back. Not because I was trying to be strong, but because there was nothing left to see. The version of home I had spent my whole life trying to belong to, it was built on conditions, silence, and sacrifice. So I decided to build something else. Something real, for me. 6 months later, I bought a small cabin near the forested edge of Dalarna, Sweden. Just a few hours from Oslo, but a world away in spirit. It wasn't luxurious. Just one bedroom, wood stove, and a creaky deck that faced a lake so still it felt like time stopped there. There was no Wi-Fi, the signal barely worked. I took that as a sign. I chopped wood every morning, learned to sand and stain pine boards, burned my fingers learning how to solder broken copper pipes. At night, I meditated under a thin wool blanket, watching the stars through a window I cleaned with my own hands. There were no emergency texts, no requests for rent money, no guilt-tripped transfers, just silence. And for once, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. But I didn't disappear. Quiet doesn't mean small. So I used what I had, my savings, my skills, to start something new. I created a private scholarship fund, small, anonymous, and very specific, for first-generation immigrant students with no financial safety net. The kind of kids who always had to be the fixer, the translator, the adult before their time. I didn't put my name on it. There are no plaques, no photos, no public thank yous. Because the only person I needed to prove anything to was me. I still don't know if what I did was right in their eyes. But I've stopped living under eyes that only look when they need something. Here, under the tall trees and the northern sky, I finally understand something simple but radical. You don't have to burn yourself to keep anyone else warm. By the time winter settled over Dalarna, I had stopped checking my email daily. There was no need, no more work crises, no more family emergencies. Just the occasional newsletter from a woodworking forum and receipts from the scholarship fund I'd created. But one afternoon in late February, I opened my inbox, and there it was, Carlos, a name that once felt like gravity, now just pixels. The subject line was empty. The preview read, "Elena, it's bad, really bad." I opened it, one short paragraph. No guilt, no manipulation this time, just collapse. The crypto stuff finally caught up. I'm bankrupt. Mom got evicted last week. We don't know where to go. That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement. Not even a single word about what I had done for them and what they did in return. I stared at the message for a long time, not in anger, not with sadness, just clarity. It wasn't a test. It was a pattern. A cycle I'd spent my entire life breaking away from, and now, standing at the edge of its final loop, I saw the choice for what it was. Freedom is not something you win once. It's something you choose again and again. I didn't reply. Instead, I logged into my banking app and opened a brand new account, unlinked, unsearchable, separate from everything I had ever used before. Not because I expected them to find my old information, but because I knew how desperation works. Desperate people don't just knock, they pry, so I built one final boundary, not out of stone, out of silence. And that was the last time I ever saw Carlos's name in my inbox. Some people think revenge is loud, explosive. A slammed door, a shouted truth, a grand act of defiance. But for me, revenge was silence, revenge was absence, revenge was peace. Because the most powerful thing I ever did wasn't cutting them off. It was finally choosing me. I didn't need to hurt them. They had to sit with the silence they created. They had to face a life without the one person who held everything together. And in that silence, I found something they never gave me: freedom without apology. Revenge isn't always destruction. Sometimes, it's reconstruction of the life they said you didn't deserve. Sometimes, the most painful thing they'll ever experience is seeing you happy. and realizing they're no longer part of the reason why. Family isn't who raised you. Family isn't blood. Family is who sees you, hears you, and never makes you earn your worth. So if you're listening to this and you've ever been the fixer, the strong one, the walking bank account, I want you to know something. You are not cold for setting boundaries. You are not heartless for choosing peace over duty. And you are not wrong for walking away. You don't owe your life to anyone who made you feel like love had to be purchased. And if they ever ask why you disappeared, tell them nothing. Let them feel what you felt for years, invisible,